Thank you, Davi. So please be aware it's my first public talk, so I'll make mistakes. I will start by trying to present myself. I started a few years ago in '97 with Ubisoft as game designer and worked on Rayman and Formula One. Nothing procedural at the time, obviously, just game designer. And then did some research and development in a very different field. Then find a friend and opened a company by myself. I opened a company in Italy, which was by itself an adventure. We did some good games. Maybe in the UK, it's a good license. It's Horrible Histories. Was ruthless romance about how bad Italians are. That was the Wii, PC, and Nintendo DS version. We also did Black Corsair or Black Privateer for PS2 and PC. And then once I closed the company, I did a couple of mobile games. And finally, I was contacted by Ubisoft again in 2013. And that's where procedural career started. I moved to Newcastle, and the Ubisoft office was collaborating with Ubisoft Massive on an important project called The Division. And I had the opportunity to initially just work on the very first division, like the mega map, the diegetic UI in Word, and learn the engine. But then we got the mandate for the underground, and that's where I did my first large-scale procedural system. The whole underground network was made with an external tool where the game director had this idea of designing maps with blueprints, like making networks of rooms and locations visually, and then having a system that stitches all the variations together. It was what I did on the technical side. It was a large team. Obviously, you have a lot of artists working on variations, on lighting, on gameplay, on thematics, and all the necessary things. It was procedural up to a certain point, because the important thing of procedural is I wanted to be uh, taking over and making the game. You want it to be helping you to iterate and to make broad initial first strokes, have a lot of passes, get the right feed and the right look you want, and then go bespoke. Have the artist working on everything, bake everything, and make it with its own identity and make it organic, right? Then after the division, I joined Cloud Imperium Games. They needed to do large scale planets and locations, so I worked on procedural cities, procedural interiors, placements of outposts, and helped another Italian that was working as technical director on procedural systems. The engine was another engine at that time. It was Lumberyard Cry engine. So switching engine all over the place. And then when it was 2016, I applied for Rockstar, and it went well. So I joined Rockstar in Toronto, where they do most of the procedural side of things. Rockstar works bespokely on cities, on every mission, but all the forests, the mountains, and other locations like you've seen also in Red Dead Redemption 2. They have a lot of procedural tools happening behind the scenes. So I was super lucky. Worked on GTA 5, worked on Red Dead Redemption 2, and worked on 6. Hope it will come out soon. We use many systems, including Houdini and including our own hyperprocessors. I mostly worked on mountains and forests and scattering systems. It was amazing as experience. Then during the pandemic, I joined multiple studios. One of the most appealing one was with Electronic Arts, moving Codemasters to Unreal. So working with them on making procedural systems for tracks that went from kind of like 4 or 5 kilometers size to 40 kilometer size. So we started using real world data to create splines and systems that could be like comparable to what PCG does now, but adapted to the type of data and reliefs that we had from the licensed materials and height fields that Codemasters had, right? Codemasters EA. Meanwhile, also I worked with another Italian company called Liquid Cube Games with NetEase on lots of procedural systems for their APAC area products. It was Unity, so interesting to go back and forth between Unreal and Unity. To finally now I joined PCF, People Can Fly, working with PCG technology in Unreal. So a lot of experiments, and that's my story in a nutshell. I will now start showing some of the videos. Obviously, I don't show the videos of the tools used in production, but something that I worked on by myself that closely resembles what was used in production, but where I fixed some of the things and I tried to do things in the way that I wanted them to be done in first instance. And then I would like, it's not going to be very long. I'd like to have most of the time spent on question and answer if there are any, because I'm really curious about what people thinks about procedural. I've been so lucky and taking part in so many projects, and I want to understand how much people likes it, how much people wants to use it, how much they want to learn it, how much they know about it, but every sort of things. So I will start by showing some videos. So I will share my screen. Let me know if it works. My screen. There we go. Can you guys see?
Yep, can see it.
Okay. So the first one, this one is the one basically to build cities very close to what we have used in Cloud Imperium games. There's also a video on their website that shows it. But the editor kind of like resembles Minesweeper, where you paint the path of the roads you want to have, and the system identifies where to put city centers, skyscrapers, residential areas, etc., and orients the building to match the geometry of the roads. Basically, I was inspired by the metrics, and I really liked how the weapon shelves were coming in. I used the ant algorithm to analyze how roads should be going, and then basically did the first pass on roads and set the road rotations, and then the pass on applying balances. There's a lot of variations, but the theme clearly here is Paris. So there's a lot of details on the rooftop because I really like that kind of architecture. It also has some details on the road level. You can have shops and additional things. This was on Unreal. No, this was on Lumberyard, yes. On a slightly modified version of Lumberyard just to allow for more detail shadowing. And it was 2000 in almost 2016, 2017. So yeah, extensive use of instances, extensive use of instangiable materials, uh, props are not physical. Yeah, the interiors of the shops don't use the parallax. I made very simple models just to give that more in-depth impression. Uh, but this gives you basically with the same kit, infinite variations. The amount of metadata you need to save for this kind of map is very, very, very low. It's just some hundreds of transforms and strings or hashes to identify the model. The It allows for easy LODs because the closer you get, the more you can load a detailed version of this kit. The kits are physically squared, so they all match in a grid-based system, and it allowed to be very light on planets, so you can have many versions. If you look at Star Cities, you can see what is it? Area 17 and Area 18 are made with this kind of system with the trenches. And you could have, in some locations, some specified hero POIs. Like in this case, I had the Tour Eiffel, obviously, because it's Paris. And this is the first system, and I wanted to show you because there is an evolution going on. So I will now show where I got in the end with procedural systems for cities. Because working with the different studios, I noticed that from the art point of view, people wanted to have cities that were very organic. So I tried to use real world data. So in this case, I used and modified an existing plugin for Unreal that loads OpenStreetMap data. I used it to generate line for a PCG system. You literally load part of the world from OpenStreetMap and magic button, obviously. And when you press that button, it loads the data into basic geometries and then starts building the PCGs. The PCGs don't have AABB, so they're not aligned to specific X and Y coordinates. They're not tied to grid, and they follow the spline curve. It use again instances systems, but it sends more complicated data to the rendering. Now the version that I can show is very limited. Obviously, where I am at the moment as sidewalks, light poles, cover systems, tons of other details, roads, and more things. But this shows where it can get. It's very fast and it's very light. I think it because it reads from existing data, it allows you to do very fast iteration. If you know what type of city you want to do, that's possibly in the world a location that resembles it, you can grab it and try. And allows for easy modification because it's not tied to any shape. You can really just grab one of the points, move it, change the shape you're building on the fly. And I also wanted to then create a different version that was based on grid, but that was based on volumes. I saw a video online and I tried to make my own version of it where you can use the same kit of geometries and combine them into basically auto booleaning buildings, and I think that's quite cool if you want to prototype a location. So those are, yeah, this is kind of like this video, and this is about the cities. Then I started working on more organic things. Let me pause this one. and the dungeons. So this is really worked on in on the division. Imagine making an underground system with different type of plots, but starting from scratch in Unreal, you really build a level with a proper lighting. I'm going through these steps to show really how fast it is to iterate on those systems. And what I did is I created my own new C++ class that is a procedural network. It's a different way of parsing the blueprints. So instead of parsing blueprints to execute commands and processes and methods, it parses the blueprints to create a layout, a map. If I go to the blueprint, each node, let me zoom in a little bit, has some parameters. One is a unique string name you can give to your piece of dungeon or map or room, and it is shown on the geometry when it's spawned. So it lets you identify that location. Let's say you want to call it esquiver room, loot room, boss room, whatever you need to call it. You have a prefix that basically selects a theme because it could be a room, it could be a dungeon, it could be a cave, or whatever. Then you select the type. The type selects of contents that it spawns. Does it spawn enemies? Does it spawn loot? Does it spawn a save point? Dialogue? And then you have sizes. Obviously, it's not precise. You cannot set meters because it's procedural, but you have a few type of sizes here. And then the chance, if you set it to 1, obviously that's a mandatory room. It will spawn. If you set it to 0.5, it means that 50-50% room will be spawned or will not be spawned. So already create variation with themes and with percentages. At the end, what I do is I create a very complicated network of nodes. You can add as many as you want. The geometry and validation system runs through C++ with very simplified collision, so it doesn't care about extent. The only thing you want to care about is how many rooms you spawn for performances. Once you have created these, you then go back to the map and you have a very simple interface that essentially allows you to have a deterministic or non-deterministic behavior. Everybody knows what it is, but we'll repeat it just for maybe who doesn't know. Deterministic means that if you have a specific seed or number, whenever you use that number, the output will always be identical. But if you turn off deterministic, in this case, it will just use random numbers. And it will give you the random number that it's been used if you really want to replicate it. And then the rest of the interface really just allows you to log simply the geometry or create the geometry or not. And then the buttons create the map or wipe the map. So once you placed it, what I do is, let's say I'm okay with this seed. I press generate. It's very fast. And it creates the geometry layout. So the components are the rooms and the corridors and the crosses. And they are artist made and they have all the nav mesh and the closing doors and everything are added by the system automatically. If I didn't like it, I can reroll and generate a new one. Because it's based on geometry collision, you can have multiple floors going above each other. This is using dungeons, but it doesn't need to be dungeon. It could be town pieces, it could be body parts, it could be anything. It's basically a procedural stitcher, essentially. Now, the next one that I want to share is something that took me a lot of time. I worked on it. on a specific game. I cannot mention what game it was, but I tried to make a simpler, exemplifying version by myself of what I actually did, a much more detailed version for work. But I loved this work. It's organic, it's in the nature, and it creates basically cliffs. In the first instance, the system selects a slope, so the angle at which you want to have cliffs. Then it takes that pocket of triangles in Houdini, it erodes it with a simulated fluid erosion, but it also has overhanging. So it basically pushes the terrain underneath the above cliff profile, and it adds some attributes that tells where humidity or terrain would accumulate. This is a starting point to where the points for the rocks are scattered. Once the rocks are scattered, all of them are boolean together into one single ginormous shell for optimization reasons and to also collect where the cracks would be. Where would the rock connect to each other? Where can I get a color applied to the mesh, blur it, and use it for attributes and for other reasons? Same thing. This big rock is boolean with the terrain, so you don't have overdraw, you don't have additional geometry compenetrating the rocks, and you get nice connection geometry, nice attributes where the two things, the rock and the terrain, touch. So you could put mud or different other attributes. Then it does remesh on the topology. So everything has like a constant topology that allows me to have better UV mapping and better attributes since I want to apply different noises and other things on top of it. And then it applies the UV, creating this unique unwrap that's kind of a triplanar version, and applies grass on the top of the toppings, and it does multiple versions of the topology, so you have LODs. And finally, it adds scattering to it. There we go. So this is all in Houdini, but I also have it running in Unreal, which probably it's a little bit better to look at. But this was again 4.2, we're talking about 2019. So no nanite, very simple geometry, but still I was performing in debug on my own project at home. And I use the attributes also for the grass scattering with the materials. Couple of versions. This one I used a little bit more detailed assets from the Unreal demos. And I tried to do big boulders as well. I think it was pretty nice. And next, I did work on a few other Houdini tools. I like Houdini, so I tried to do a similar thing of what I did in PCG recently. In Houdini, there is a node that allows you to read from OpenStreetMap data and scatter instances as well. And this has been output to CryEngine, modified CryEngine to have lighting in interiors and exteriors, so that you kind of have like real scale Sydney here, and it's a one-click way. For the interiors, I use again procedural systems. This is intended more for architectural reasons than for game reasons. I don't see any game needing to have interiors everywhere and the real scale buildings because it doesn't make sense in the timing, in gameplay, in performances, and in the fun for the player as well, I believe. But I really like to do this experiment. The other one is a showreel, a quick showreel of the things I did for WRC in Houdini. So this is a banking system that aligns the track spline to the terrain. It creates the profile tracks for classic rally game. Then it cuts it away from the terrain and connects the terrain to the track. It uses some very organic slope rules to select where to scatter nature, and well, you end up basically with a classic track. This is just short demo to show what it is, but then yeah, you have the final product. The other one is Unity. This one, basically, there was a time when NetEase wanted to uh, create a system called PCG, Procedural Content Generation. So they wanted it in Unity, and I came up with this idea of painting directly on the map uh, with a specific hex color. You basically define the recipe. So one could be a pine forest, one could be a mangrove forest, or whatever. And yeah, you could do all sort of drawings. And then at the end, I'm going to press the generate button and you get the scattering. This is very simple. It's Poisson based. It doesn't have decals, pedals, and all the other details that you generally want. This is just a demo of the tool. And you still can go back and forth between your painting and your output, but it also creates those walls for collision and gameplay, but also to basically encapsulate the probes for each of the type of forest only within this space. So you didn't need to have grid-based probes, resulting in a less amount of memory. Yeah. This one I really enjoyed to work on because it was outside of my usual skill set, C#, external DLLs, and image formats. I had to integrate a lot of things in Houdini. It doesn't have many of the base system that you have in Unreal for some of the procedural things. But in the end, it was quite good. Then this one is, because I'm very old, I'm 50, and I started by working on a game that was basically Wolfenstein 3D, and I wanted to do procedural things also on that engine. I used the Love 2D, it's a Lua engine, and rewrote basically Doom, but with the procedural infinite maps. In this case, the system creates multiple rooms. Sometimes they overlap, sometimes they don't. When they don't overlap, it creates random corridors and chops them off if it goes to a place where there's no neighbor room. And it is, yeah, it was pretty fun to do. So obviously, raycast based. So what is happening here is you have a cone of view and it detects what are the boxes that you're intersecting, and those coordinates are used to actually cast the vertical lines that you use to create that 3D effect. But the fun thing of this one is that it's completely infinite. It works on Android, it works on everything, I'm the only one having this game. All the textures are generated with Midjourney, apart from the sprites that are the original one of the game. I mixed Hexen, Doom, and all sort of ID software games, just for fun.